Motivational Mindset Podcast with Switch Motivation. Hello, my name is Richard Knight, and welcome to episode 9 of the Motivational Mindset Podcast. This week I'm chatting to Jon Gibson, an executive coach and education consultant. Enjoy.
So my name is Jon Gibson, and you can tell by my dulcet tones I originate from the great northern world of the northeast of England, and I live in the southwest now. I am the director and lead coach and consultant for Backdrop Leadership Group. We have been trading under one name or other for about 7 or 8 years now, and my background originally was education, although I have to admit that's after a number of failed other things, failed school, failed sixth form, back to work, back to school, back to sixth form, back to A levels, and then eventually university. And I went into education about the age of 26. My last contracted post was head of school in a medium-sized secondary school in a very urban area. Mm-hmm. And what I do is I support people to achieve their goals, either through education consultancy, coaching, or mentoring. Oh, and I'm fully qualified ILM level 7 executive coach, as well as other things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that enough?
Yeah. So why developing and helping people reach their goals?
So it's, to be honest with you, it's my happy place. When I was at school, where was the happiest? I was happiest when I was helping people to achieve. I was happiest when I was supporting people to move forward in what they're doing. So in the assembly, I was happiest when I was doing the motivational work with the students. When I was happiest in the day-to-day school, I was talking to and working with people to develop their mindset, their motivational moving forward. And I was happiest when I was helping fellow colleagues to develop and improve what they did. Mm-hmm. And what I realized, I was happiest when I was helping them in the coaching, mentoring, advisory role. So that's why I kind of stepped out and decided to take a change of direction after 20 years in the world, because I felt happiest, if you like, and most motivated and ready to help when I was working with people one-to-one or small groups, or trying to get them to move forward in their practice.
Yeah, fantastic. The whole education world is an interesting one. My background, I started out there myself, as you know, and it's a really interesting. You mentioned sort of going out of education, coming back into it, and all of that side of things. From my point of view and my experience of being in education, is it? I can say I'd like to say it's different. Is it different? Do you think it's different in terms of that? The world that people live in from an educational point of view. What I'm trying to say is, I moved straight into teaching from having been in education until I was 21. So I did the whole A-level university thing, and then I went straight into teaching. And I was teaching, A-level students at the age of 22 when I was 22, which was like, wow, this is a bit odd. So that motivation for me was all around, I think was very similar to yours in terms of that happy place being, I like seeing people develop, and it's good fun. But I got to a point where I thought, I've got to go and find out if there's something else in the world, because education, in terms of the way it's almost set up, it's not real. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, the very structure is not real, is it? We corral our students into year groups based on a predefined academic year, whereas in the workplace you don't get that. So, I mean, this story. I was asked to leave sixth form, and the final straw being I bunked A-level geography to go see Tiffany at Eldon Square, and a free performance at Eldon Square. So, and my geography teacher said, my head of geography said, I think maybe it's time for change, John. And I thought, yeah, he is right. Because I had no motivation to do what I was doing, basically. Yeah. So I went out there, and I tell you, there's nothing more motivating than the fact you have no money, and actually, when I left school, I had no money. I had a sixth form college. I ended up doing a short period signing on, and then got a job, and then ended up in the civil service for 4 years in the insolvency service.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is different because when I was working in the insolvency service, there were people in their 60s and there were people as young as me who was 18 in the same business. We'd go out on a Friday and go out for a social together, and it would be people would be there together, and that's where that alongside another person is where I got my proper first taste of being mentored by people who cared. People who actually cared about me, who wanted me to move on, and that's one of the reasons why I ended up in university. And also the fact that I saw the benefit and the motivation, and which gave me motivation of education. So I couldn't get above executive officer in my department because you had to have a degree. So that ceiling was just brutally obvious. So, and it really just kind of drew me to realize that our education has a purpose, and that really motivated me. So I did night school.
Yeah.
And I cracked on with night school, and I got on with learning. I mean, I got E's at night school. Let's be honest with you, I wasn't the greatest motivated human being. I scraped. I scraped through my A levels.
Yeah.
And in fact, in my first job as a teacher, I was told I was going to be head of law, A-level law, and I said to the head teacher at the time, I've only got an E in law.
Yeah.
And she went, well, you're more qualified than anyone else in that room.
It's a good way of looking at it, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But interestingly, I was absolutely because I had to teach it. I became a far better law student, and I was motivated and ready to do it because I wanted to shine. So therefore, I was ready, and I wanted to make sure I did it. And ironically, every kid in our first academic year got a better grade in GA level than I did. They were all more qualified than me at the end of the year.
I love that. That's a really interesting view in terms of that whole motivational piece, and I think it's something that a lot of younger people have an issue with when that education is forced upon them. And don't get me wrong, we've got to learn stuff to be able to do stuff, and I do get it, but you get to that point where that motivation to be academically better than somebody else is not there in a lot of people. The idea that academia is something that motivates you, oh, well done, here's a certificate. Well, I don't really give a monkey's, to be perfectly honest, if I've got a certificate or not.
No,
is it going to help me? And to your point, is it going to help me get money or be able to go somewhere that I really want to now, i.e. go through that ceiling, that level ceiling? So that makes a massive difference, doesn't it? And in terms of the kids, when you were teaching, did you see a big difference? I mean, you may well be teaching in areas where the academic wasn't particularly high, but was there an obvious difference in terms of kids and their motivation to be in that classroom?
Oh yeah, definitely, and upon reflection and ironically reading and learning post school, what I realized that most of the children, in my opinion, the children who lacked motivation actually lacked what we call self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is that kind of belief that you can do it. So we wonder why some students are not motivated to learn when you, from day one in your school, and we talk about this a lot in education, from day one in the school, they may have experienced things that are just a little bit more difficult for them, or they've felt failure in a subject repeatedly. So why does that affect them? And I think, upon reflection, that's because they lose their sense of efficacy, self-efficacy. And self-efficacy and high motivation, like Dewey or something, there was a piece of research. It's highly likely that self-efficacy comes alongside high motivation. So you need to believe you can do it. And again, it's stuff since I've kind of left teaching and I've really got into the coaching and did my level 7 stuff. So we call psychological capital model, and it talks about hope, optimism, self-efficacy, and resilience. That's psychological capital required to kind of be successful as a leader. And I often use the dancing man from the festivals and kind of talk through what this means. But if we just take self-efficacy, if you failed all your life, or you find it particularly difficult sitting next to someone who's really quite capable in that area, and you're not capable, you lose your ability for self-efficacy. So in my experience, so if I was at school now, I would have needs. I'd have something diagnosed, and I'm pretty certain.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I can't. When I was at school, 2 or 3 words, 1 word, 2 words, 3 words. That would be the maximum I could read off a board and remember. So I've got some work memory issues there.
Yeah.
So I sat next to a guy, and that poor lad I sat next to had to read the board out to me every session.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So over time, that gets quite mundane for him and quite mundane for me. But the worst bit, if you look at mathematics, my particular weak spot was math. In fact, I was happiest when I got my GCSE math 22 than I was my A levels. I jumped up and down and whooped because I thought I'd failed it. And this is how bad I thought it was. I went into the foundation maths exam at sixth form college, bearing in mind I was studying after work. And I sat down, and then my maths teacher came in and went, "John!" shouted. You couldn't get away with this these days. "John! Huh? What are you doing in this room?" "I'm doing maths, sir." He went, "You're in the hires, you idiot. Get out." I just assumed I'd be put in for the foundation. I hadn't even checked. I just went to the foundation. So my motivation, my ability of self-efficacy was low. And interestingly, self-efficacy can be improved just in many ways, and motivation just by there's a bit of research again. I can't remember the guy, the person, where by being able to say other people achieve in that area.
Right.
And one thing I did when I was at school, so I used to teach the low prior retaining English because I was a drama teacher really, so therefore I didn't really know what to do in English. Although I did, I'm joking to some extent. And I was given a low prior retaining group. Notice the phrase low prior retaining and not low ability, because there's a big difference between those. One's a deficit language and one is a language which assumes that you have potential. And we used to, at the time, have this on foot of every book, you had to put your predicted grade. So these children's predicted grades at the time were E, F, G. Where's your motivation when you know that the entire country says a C and above is a success?
Yeah.
So where's your motivation to achieve that? There's no motivation. So the first day I got with these kids, and there was a book on the table, a marker pen, and they had all their grades stuck on the front as normal. So they sat down, and I was a good fun, but I was strict as well. The kids knew that, because I ran discipline, I would be, they would mess around. But I ran through, I used to make the sessions fun for them because they didn't like it. You talk about children couldn't spell their own name. That's the level of some of the challenges in that room. So they took a black pen, told them to pick the black pen up, and I said to them, "Right, I want you to take that black pen. I want you to put a black line through your predicted grade." So they and they were like, look nervous. I said, "Look, I'm an assistant head. You can do this. Nobody's going to tell me." "Oh, okay, sir." So they put a black line, and then I just put C+ in massive letters on the board. C+. I want you to write C+ on your book. I don't want you a little in the corner. I want you to write a massive C+ on the front of your book. And they did. And they looked at me and said, "That is the plan. Nobody wants to get an E, F, or G. Everyone wants a C+. We are going for a C+. And if you don't achieve your C+, I failed you. You haven't failed yourself." So I started that. And then they were like, "Oh, it's a bit weird." But the next lesson, I got the head of English to come in. And he had the top high prior retaining group in the school. And I said to him in front of the kids, and this is not really I'm not sure we'll be allowed to do this these days, but anyway, I took a £20 note out, and I put the £20 note, and I put it in an envelope, and I sealed it, and we put our names on it. I said, "I bet you now, £20, my group's progress scores will be higher than your group's."
Yeah.
And he went, "Okay." We'd all set this up, obviously.
Yeah.
So he knew what I was going to do because I would have said, I said, that's the bet. And I used to start the session and say, some of the sessions, "Okay, I've got to win that bet. That's pizzas for everybody. Come on."
Brilliant.
Motivation.
Yeah. Excellent.
Why are we going for it? And there's the benefit motivation. But I think that comes back to those psychological state, giving the kids hope.
Yeah.
Giving them optimism, self-efficacy. We can do this together. You are capable of doing this. And also resilience. So when it was collapsing, we used to step back and say, "Right, it's collapsed. Why?"
Yeah.
Why? Let's go back to that. And the other thing I did for those kids was I took out everything in that course they didn't need to pass.
Right.
Anything they didn't need out that course, I took out. And I said to them, this is why I know you're going to pass, because you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about this. And I worked with a fabulous teaching assistant, and we worked, it was like a dance. At every point in that lesson, a child had someone talking to them and coaching them on what they were going to do, building their hope, their resilience. Not every kid got C's, but most kids outperformed their grades significantly, but they had hope, optimism, and they knew they had a chance, which they didn't think at the start of the session. So that was quite a long conversation. Yeah. But, I've got to say that. So it's psychological capital. For me, it's kind of the big thing. And then one thing I think we need to revisit within schools and formalizing our training, teaching our staff to build hope, optimism, self-efficacy, and resilience in our students.
Well, it's the core thing, isn't it? The whole idea of education and being, there's a skill there, and we work on that because it's easier to measure. Is one of the key things. I know we've had a brief conversation about this around that sort of motivational side of things, and traditionally motivation is that sort of pink and fluffy thing that you can't put your finger on. And if we're going to talk about motivation, it's going to be money, isn't it? There we go. We'll motivate you by giving you some money, particularly from a work environment point of view. And for certain instances that might work, or the idea that there is a goal you're working to, but there's lots of other things that come into place. And that whole self-efficacy thing, that's the first time I've heard that. I think that's absolutely true, isn't it? I think that almost comes down to the idea of that sort of self-limiting belief, those internal conversations our heads have, internally we have with ourselves.
With negative thinking errors, I think, was it Van Neuren, I can never say his name. The critical voice, negative thinking errors, negative thinking cycles. And I think every human suffers from them. And there are some really there's some things you can do about it, some simple CBT, cognitive behavior therapy strategies, which links to positive psychology research. And from my point of view, from a coach's point of view, I'm really keen on positive psychology because there's a research base to it.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because return of investment or impact is difficult to measure in coaching. So how do you then measure it? So I'll try and base my work on that positive psychology approach. So there's a real kind of positive research behind it. Yeah. And one of the simple things is, when you one strategy, and I can't remember who said this tool. It's called a tool. Sorry, one tool you can do is when you hear your voice say you're crap at that, pardon the language, you're not very good at that, sir. You respond and say, no, thank you, I've got this. I did all right there. And you actually talk back to yourself. Okay. And there's things like you can tap yourself on that. You can do a physical change, and you can actually train yourself to talk back.
Yeah.
So whenever I do a review in a school, when I drive out that car park, I'm hammering myself in my head. I know I am. I get ready for critical voice to come in. So I have to respond to my critical voice as I'm driving. And what I'm doing is I'm working through the mistakes I've made in the day. But actually, I try and balance and say, well, yeah, that was a mistake, but this really worked. So I try and answer it. And so one of the techniques of that critical voice is just to answer the voice back with. And someone told me that great one was, oh, thanks, I've got this, or I have this.
Yeah.
And actually respond. I don't use this polite language when I talk to myself, if I'm honest with you.
No, that's a good point. Actually, you got to do it in the right frame it in the right way, haven't you? The whole idea of the anchors piece is really interesting. From the neurolinguistic programming point of view. That idea of this is I'm feeling good, so let's make sure that we mark that by being that physical state, tapping and etc. Lots and lots of different ways of working with motivation actually use that sort of technique, which is really interesting. So you've spoken there about how you move on, or you moved on into the world of coaching and development. Now you're working with adults, presumably, is the majority of the people you're working with, about fair to say, yeah. Do they still have? Can you still see those not issues, the challenges that people have had at school, and they're brought through into their work lives, and as they go through their careers, they're still there. Is that something that still manifests itself?
Yeah, the phrase, I was never any good at this at school, and I'm as guilty as that
Right.
with maths myself. I'm
Yeah.
never always, that comes into the conversations quite a lot. But they tend to, the majority of stuff is kind of fixing themselves within their workplace. They judge themselves against their workplace, about the thing, about where they are within that. And it's a difficult place, isn't it? Because some people like praise, some people don't like as much praise, how to respond to that. What normally, I mean, in coaching sessions, it's, without doubt, it will be that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
In many that will come up. I think everyone suffers from that. But yeah, it's definitely ingrained. I think you come through with some ingrained stuff. Interesting, and there was, we could talk about probably the issue is that state and trait argument. So state is your emotional being, as you know, and trait is kind of your personality. Your personality can be moved, but not generally. It's not movable as much as you think. So the classic example is, I am now a different person when I was younger. When I was in my 20s, my personality has changed a little bit. I'm still gregarious. They call them the big 5 personality traits. I can't remember the name. One of them is kind of extroversion, to be extrovert. That sort of stuff. I can't remember what they're called, and it's called the Big 5. Yeah, stability, extrovertism, openness, agreeable, conscientious. Those kind of Big 5 personality traits that you can have, which are kind of successful, conscientious thinking. But to some extent, you are who you are. But you can change your state, your emotional being. And that you said that grounding concept, when you recognize that you need to be happy and you remember when you were happy, My favorite is savoring. When I was in one of the schools, when I was in a bad place and I could feel myself going down, I used to sneak off to this place that you could go through a fire door and look across a vista.
Yeah.
And I would stand there for 5-10 minutes and I would just watch the vista just to bring myself down. And then go back in if I could catch it, because you can't always catch it. But back to this kind of the state of trait. People worry about their personalities, but actually your personality is relatively fixed. But your state of being, your emotional being, that's the one we can deal with and work with. And they also, they often think about that kind of negative thinking cycle as just being their own thoughts, but it's actually sometimes about how you talk to other people as well, and how you perceive other people, having negative thinking cycles about other people, about being very fixed in their mindset. Oh, that guy does this and he does this, and that's why this is happening. And we have to unpick that as well. So people very often get fixated, and we don't know why that is, but they are. That is, I mean, I don't know why that is. I'm sure research does, but that kind of takes it forward. And I think, some of the research is about kind of people often want an opportunity often need an opportunity to be challenged and fail, rather than not allowed to fail. I mean, I work for one leader, or for one guy who he would tell you in the meeting, I don't think it'll work. I don't think it'll work because X, Y, and Z. But I think you need to go away and do it. I tell you, that motivated me to death. That did, because I'd be leaving the room thinking, I'm going to make this work.
You're going to make it work. Yeah.
It will work. It will work. And usually, some of the things he said come true, and some of the things he didn't say. Then I worked for another leader. He wouldn't allow you to do anything until he unpicked it and unpicked it and unpicked it and put it after meeting after meeting. And I was just demotivated to the point I just didn't want to work for this guy at the end of it.
Yeah.
In this process, the male has been referred to as a single gender and could be male or female. But it's the guy, but there is some research around Duick, I can never remember these people, but they talked about this concept of motivation can be from doing something and getting it wrong, as well as praise. And I found that firsthand in the workplace. If you unpick what I do, I'm just going to shut down. I don't like it. It doesn't motivate me. What I need is the opportunity to go for it. Now, we work with children. I get there's an issue there that you can, you need in those cases. But when I was a civil servant, when I was at my best, I was allowed to get on with it. I can remember, just get on with this, John. Can you make sure this happens? Yeah. I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a great civil servant. I was 18. I was more interested in going out with my mates. But I get that. But I was young. I was young at the time. But and the other thing about motivation is when my parents are lovely, but they just didn't get education. They were lovely, but they didn't actually get. And my mum said to me, "Why would you give up a perfectly good job to go to university?" I can remember that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't meaning to be negative. She just didn't understand it. But I thought about that, and when I went to university in my first weeks, I had my nose to the grindstone because I'd come out of work and I'd been used to work, and I treated every day at university like a day of work. So I got up, I went to work, I went into the university, I sat in the library when I wasn't in lectures or I had lunch in the uni, usual stuff. But my motivation was different than many of the people because in my head I couldn't go home. I could not go home and not pass this degree.
Hello. Hope you're enjoying this episode. When you've finished, why not subscribe to the Motivational Mindset podcast to learn more about motivation in business and beyond. Thanks. Now, back to the podcast.
I couldn't because I'd given up a perfectly good job to go to university. So interesting, that was so motivating for me. And then that self-efficacy, that seeing other people achieve around me and understanding I could achieve, really pushed me.
Yeah.
And I met my future wife, who, quite frankly, kept me on the straight and narrow.
Well, he's got to.
Yeah.
It's interesting you speak about the leader side of things, and obviously you're working with leaders through what you do on a daily basis. But that the impact on a leader on the motivation we've alluded to there of teams and individuals is massive. They always talk about, I think, what is it they say? Nobody leaves a job because of, I can't remember what they say.
Yeah.
The majority of the people leave any role because of their manager.
Yeah.
Is that changing? Are we still in this place where we're failing our employees because of the lack of leadership development that's right?
I mean, I think businesses are focused. The larger the business, the more focus is on developing their leadership in a planned manner. I mean, that's a truism, isn't it? Because if you're running your own business, you focus on running your own business every day. And that's kind of where the world of coaches come in, because very often they'll help them unpick what the issues, the challenges that person's facing. And I think that's where coaches help the small business leader, because we can kind of deliver that really high quality one-to-one CPD, but help them unpick. Because I'm a fan of the transformational process, and which I think was once defined as identify a change in myself, identify a change in my relationship with others, and identify a change within the organization around me. And that is kind of where you're working to try and support the coachee working with other people. And sometimes it's about the person, because I think, one of the for me, one of the things I feel very uncomfortable with when I hear people I know say, this is my leadership style. This is how I am a leader. And then I think, well, that's great for you, but it's not great for the person that doesn't want that. You have to understand the person you're working for. For that example of me, you can't unpick something and keep taking it apart from me. But even as much, as much as it may help, it's also demoralizing. So a system in education, you probably remember, is if there's something big happening and the senior leader's doing it, often they'll take it to the senior leadership team meeting. And one of my bosses got a great phrase. He went, "John, you bring it to SLT, we'll give you a good kicking, and then you go away and do it right." And I just cracked up. But it was a one-off conversation about what you want to do. It took me ages until he said this to me to realize what they were doing. You get they'll pick it apart for you, give you what they think. You go away, and then that's it. It's your job to get on with it then. That sort of thing. But but within the major institutions, there is very much a culture. I think the larger ones, from my limited knowledge through the coaching sphere, because I've not worked in industry for a long time, and I was a civil servant before I was a teacher. I cut grass for the council when I left school. That was interesting. But that was a different world. But yeah, so I think they have more development programs, and in education there is now a fully structured national professional qualification process that's been really developed to develop leaders in schools. And then larger HR departments, you have the ILM program. There's one program of leadership training which is available for people, highly structured, highly developed programs put across. So yes, I think leadership does have it. I think it's more difficult for the small business leaders because they are struggling on the day-to-day, but I think coaching is really relevant to everyone. People say, what is executive coaching? It's from wanting to be a leader right up to CEO and trust. It's anyone who wants to be within the leadership program. So what's the answer to the question? The answer is yes. I think there are development programs, and the answer to the question is I think it's more difficult when you're on small budgets or you're on large budgets with limited numbers of people when you're trying to develop it.
Yeah. So from sort of experience of working with various sized businesses as we do, you can see that there is almost that transitional phase where that growth of an organization is getting beyond just the individual, where that coaching may be very effective, or they've maybe got one other person with them. As they're then moving into those 5, 10, 15 employees, there is that gap, isn't there, where we haven't got the time or the resource to put in these leadership courses and to formalize it and do all of that sort of thing. So therefore we'll get the best people, or people who are really good at what they do, and then we'll get them to be a manager, get them to be the leader, because they're clearly good at what they do. Doesn't seem to be the best way of doing it from what I've seen. I don't know whether you'd agree with that.
Well, if you look at the football analogy, just because you're a great player doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great manager. And and how many times have we fallen for that trick? Where they were great on the field. Mourinho don't think he ever made first class football. Top level football ever. And and the managers that were the most successful, I don't think Ferguson wasn't a top class player. I don't know. I can't remember. I don't think he was. But then you got Pep and all that. So yes, I don't think you do make a great manager because you're great at your job. And education was very much you earn your spurs in the classroom, showing that you're a great teacher. But education's a little weird because you're respected by your peers as a leader, from your ability to teach and then lead. It's a weird world. And business, I think they bring you, say, oh, you're good at this job, you can then supervise, and then you can manage, and then you hope that by a process of informal mentoring, they will develop their leadership. But then I think what the danger is, you adopt the norms of that industry or that business, and that could be quite a toxic culture where you adopt the norms of that particular institution, and then you work within what you think is acceptable for them, and then when you step out, you're completely different. I have a friend of mine who was in the motor industry, and he was a manager in the motor industry, and he went into another industry, and he was asked by his manager if he had Tourette's. Because he swore all the time. He went, what are you talking about? He says, well, the staff are worried because you swear all the time. He said, well, what, do you not? And he went, no. And there's a no, read your policy. There's a no swearing culture. It was like, oh, right, okay.
It is, and that's really interesting because that sort of leads on to that idea of that sort of environmental impact on your motivation. The fact that you are in certain areas, in certain ways that you're supported by certain people, or the culture is really important in terms of supporting motivation internally driven, really. It is yours, it is your motivation, but that impact on the way I certainly see it myself. If I'm operating in different circles, I almost morph into the motivational level of my surroundings. And so that's really quite hard work for individual, because you're trying to fit in, particularly if you're going into a new work environment. So yeah, from my point of view, that's a really interesting one. I don't know whether that's something that you sort of see as well.
Yeah, and that's there's where the dancing man analogy comes in. You've seen that video of the guy in the festival dancing by himself. You ever seen that yet? Yeah.
So sorry, if you just explain for the listeners.
So there's a great little meme, or whatever you call these children do call them these days. And he's at a festival in the States, and he's by himself, and he's a radical dancer, should we say, by himself in a group, and someone's videoing him because he is literally standing there, shirt off, dancing away in a really outgoing and quite interesting way of dancing. Yeah. But then someone runs up and joins him. And then, the person joining him is kind of taking the mick a little bit, but he's being fun with them. But the dancing man turns around and gives him a huge hug and thanks him. And then 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5, and then there's a massive group of people dancing, just out there dancing.
Yeah,
completely. So you've got to, and if you analogize, if you put that to a leadership from a leadership point of view, this guy was doing something out of the norm from the rest of everybody else. And he persisted and continued to do the thing. He didn't let anyone stop him. And there's your vision, if you like, having a really clear vision of what you want to do. But there's also the hope. I'm hopeful that this will change. He's optimistic that it will change. He's hopeful, but he has optimism. He will move forward. So you got your vision, then you model your behavior to everyone else around you. So that modeling, then people say, oh, actually, this has got something about it, really. And then one person joins, think, no, this is the right way. 2 people join, this is the right way. 3 people, and then what you have is eventually your industry, your change. So if you go back to transformational leadership and you talk about the concept of a change in yourself, a change in your relationship with others, and a change in the organization around you, change doesn't happen overnight, and people don't change overnight. You have to model what you expect over a long period of time, and change doesn't happen unless leaders actually make that change happen. Sometimes you get someone from the coal face who makes that change. I mean, they do that. You can see that in people working hard, stuff like that. But leaderships, they're the people who transform cultures. In terms of where they want to do it. Not forgetting that the people at the core face, they're the people that do a lot of the work that makes the change happen. So the dancing man is kind of this idea of modeling vision, modeling persistence, optimism, hope, self-efficacy, the belief that you can get the task done. And again, back to that kind of psychological capital. And from a coach's point of view, I'm very much always trying to look for strengths. As part of that positive psychology, because they're interlinked. They're intrinsically interlinked. So what is your strengths? And how you can use those strengths to motivate what you're doing, as well as, to keep you motivated. And I'm trying to motivate people by having hope for them, optimistic about what they're doing, being hopeful for what they do.
That's an interesting concept as well, isn't it? Yeah, it's that whole, the supportive nature of coaching and being there for somebody. And I think, from a younger person's point of view, it is the idea that there is somebody there giving you that support. But as we've said, all the way through those careers as well, people need that confirmation that it can happen. And they can have an impact on their environment and their motivation as well. So
and I would give a big Dave shout out to 3 people. Dave Thomas, when I was 16, he's no longer with us, bless him. Young, he was the guy who ran the theatre group. My background is drama and theatre, and it was because of him and the people in that drama group that I started to change as a human, not to discover who I was a bit more. And then when I went to the civil service, Janet Metcalf and Dave Elliott, I'll let you know. And actually, they're not just them. There were other people in that room. I got to be careful, because there were quite a few people in that. I realized in hindsight, took more than just a professional interest. They were giving me time and exploring and helping me to rewire, if you like, my expectations of myself, and that was really interesting to show it could be done. So Dave Elliott had this conversation about him once, and basically, you can change, John. You can be something else. You do need, he basically, and Janet Metcalf just kept at me and gave me the hope. I don't know. bless her, and then there were other leaders. And all these people in the industry, in the business, you can make a difference. The problem with mentoring internally, unqualified, untrained mentoring is that you may not get somebody who has that drive or commitment. So this is where bringing an external coach or mentor in works, because after you have someone who's trained, they're not on the political situation. They're not interested in the politics. They're just interested in what the coaching model is.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing is, you got to remember, people have got to be ready for change. So developmental readiness is as much with alongside kind of the motivation to change are the indicators of success. So at that time, I'd come out of school, I failed. That's the truth of it. I laugh about it. I came out of secondary school with 2 GCSEs, 2 O levels at the time, physics and science. I think honestly, my markers were drunk. How on earth I passed physics and science? They had been on the beer at lunchtime, and mine was the first paper back, and they were in a good mood, because I have no idea how I passed. It's a standard joke at my house. Every one of my children, the 3 children, 2 of the 3 children have done GCSEs. They've all absolutely smashed me out of the park. They sit and go, how many GCSEs have you got, Dad? I've got 6. How long did it take you to do that, Dad? And I'm like, hands up at the table, who's failed GCSEs? And I'm literally the only person who puts his hand up at the table, and they mock me mercilessly. So I needed someone to rewire me a little bit, to give me the motivation. But I was also ready, because I knew I needed the change. I wasn't like, hey, let's get on with it. Yeah. But I was ready, so I had that motivation. And that's what I'm trying to always instill, help and unpick the coach and the mentors to get the motivation to move forward. It's doable. Everything's doable. And a friend of mine's got one of the big jobs in education, head teacher. He dropped a text saying, I got the job, and I sent it back. Oh, really? Well done. He says, and then quite a long text. It was that self-realization about what he'd done. Because as much as we like to beat education, being a head teacher is a horrifically difficult job. Horrifically. And I sent back, it's a job done it's a job done for humans by humans, and humans and they continue to do the job. You're a human, and you've got a lot of background. You can't do it. And actually, what I was trying to do is just say, is that motivation? You were ready for it. You knew you were ready for it. You had the motivation to do it. Other people could do it. So self-efficacy, that self-efficacy, people around you can do it. It's motivation. You will do it. Yeah. And he did it. And he was an excellent head, and still is an excellent head. So that's fantastic. In industry, we need motivation. And I'm going back to the industry world. And I've dealt with quite a lot of people have changed sectors, and that change in sectors could be quite disconcerting, because you have these accepted norms in your sector, like that guy got told off for swearing, because he reckoned it. But you have these accepted norms, and these accepted norms can knock you, and but you were ready for change, and you had the motivation to make the change, and you made the change. You just got to, for me, it's going back to remembering that you were ready for your change, and therefore motivated to make that change.
It's that self-awareness piece, isn't it? It's that understanding and acknowledgement of that emotional state that you've got. And to go back to state side of things, that's fantastic. So,
and readiness in coaching is actually one of the biggest predeterminators of success. If the person is ready to be coached, they are more likely to succeed, which is why we have the chemistry session. And I end it saying, look, if you don't want to be coached, do not take this opportunity. Go away and think about it a bit more. And ironically, the longer you wait from the point where someone says, I'm motivated and ready, basically says to you in different words, I'm motivated and ready. The research shows the longer you wait from that statement to get in the coaching, the less likely the coaching and readiness is to succeed. So you do need to kind of move relatively quickly at that point, rather than procrastinate. So you're going to ask a question?
No. I was just going to say, as we come towards the end of our conversation here, in terms of your work, and how do people access more information about you and the Backdrop Leadership Group? What's the best way of, where's the best way of getting some info?
So Backdrop Leadership Group is www.backdropleadership.com, and you can call me on 0333 344 1976, and I have no idea why I picked that number. I just love that phrase, 1976. It has this kind of bounce to it. 76. I just love it.
There you go. Makes me smile now whenever I hear that. I'm going
to...
absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sure there must be some footballing reference or something to it.
Something important about those numbers, those digits, or even that year.
Was that the year they had the really hot summer? 1970.
It was something like that, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's something like that. There's some positivity in that phrase. I don't know why I love it. Oh, well, and I would love to hear if anyone wants to talk about their needs. And to be honest with you, a conversation is the first start. Just ask. Just
Well, anybody listening out there, please do get in contact with Jon, because as you can tell, he's quite good at conversations and having a chat and a bit of a banter. We can drink and speak and have coffee for hours and hours. It's great fun, but we're going to have to bring this one to an end, because that's what it is. It's all about podcasts. We're going to leave the audience wanting more, Jon. So that would be fantastic. But before we go, we've mentioned loads of different things around motivation. There's been lots of information there. The one thing that you perhaps would leave people with in terms of their motivational mindset and how to keep focused going forward from now?
Belief. I mean, so if you take visualization strategy, so if you're looking to move forward, visualize that you actually achieve it. It's so well researched. It's huge in sport, that visualization of you in that room. And I'll give you an example of a person who succeeded as a result of visualization. When I was at college, before I was asked to leave because I went to see Tiffany, I had a drama lecturer, and he told a story about passing his driving test. He passed his driving test in his 30s, and he said, I acted my way into passing my driving test. And we went, what do you mean? He said, so I taught a guy when I was at school, and I saw this guy one day reversing a monstrous bin person truck. What do you call them? Refuge truck. He said a monstrous refuge truck down a really tight northeast pit village street, which basically means cars on both sides, very tight. He said, and I thought to myself, right, if he can pass his driving test, because I taught him, I can pass my driving test. So he visualized himself passing his driving test, but as that boy, that young man that was driving this thing, and that's how he passed his test. Before he went into the session, he called it acting into it. We would call it visualization. If we were ever afraid, visualize yourself achieving your goal, and think, and not just, think about it. And when you go in the room, spend a few seconds before you go in the room, minutes, and this is who I'm going to be. This is where I'm going to be in that room. This is who I'm going to, and visualize that success. And why I keep referring to sport, Johnny Wilkinson, the Welsh kicker, these guys kicking those balls, you see them visualize that ball over the post.
Yeah.
And if professional sport are using it, it's got research and impact, because there's so much money in the game.
Fantastic. There's your top tip to leave to end us on for our podcast. Jon, thanks ever so much. A pleasure to speak to you, and see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to me. If you need a babelfish to translate from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they're available on babelfish.com. That's a joke.
This was a Switch Motivation production from Switch Performance Limited. Music by Dennis Kischuk from Pixabay, the Motivational Mindset Podcast. Download, listen, subscribe